It's such a big universe, and I feel so grateful that I just get to be like a little part of it, to be honest.
Julia, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Congrats on the film.
Thank you so much.
You and Chris have such an interesting dynamic and interesting relationship in this movie.
Yeah.
And I wondered what was that process of developing that with Chris like, of finding that sweet spot of being married but having some emotional distance, or did you try to avoid developing it too much so that the distance between you was a little bit more authentic?
You know, we had quite a bit of rehearsal, and with the rehearsal, it was a lot of talking about the relationship and what it used to be and how it kind of got to that place where, how it is in the film, at the moment. So currently, so it was, we just discussed about it a lot. We had quite a bit of rehearsal of talking. I'm looking at your arms and I'm like, oh wow, he's a horror fan.
Yeah, that's a fair way of putting it. But speaking of horror, you're also a horror fan. Like We Are What We Are, and the Royal Hotel I was a huge fan of, and Apartment 7A. This movie though, you're working against prosthetics, which I believe is a little bit new for you in the genre realm. And I wonder what that experience was like. Did that make it a more authentic, visceral experience to see it in front of you, or was that like an entirely new challenge?
Well, I love the Royal is like with horror. It's associated with horror. I guess it's tense. I think this project to me is actually different than any other project that I've done, even in the past, even if it's like with the horror stuff, because there's much more action. And then it is very tense, but there's a lot of action in this movie. There's a lot of running, so it's a little scarier because it's actually happening. But yeah, no, it was super fun.
And did shooting out of sequence, since Chris had his prosthetics to kind of help keep him in check, did shooting out of sequence cause any interesting challenges for you?
Well, shooting out of sequence is always hard, and that's why you always have to almost like memorize a script. Like just that you can know it like in your bones. I mean, I read the script fully like multiple times, but then I also like read, I read it almost every night, like multiple, just different pages, like every night too when I get home. So, and also 10 pages before what we have to shoot the next day. Yeah.
Well, I am here with Comic Book, and I know you can't talk about a certain project you have coming up. A lot of fans were really surprised to find out you were playing a Silver Surfer, and just throughout the process, I wondered if there was anything that like really surprised you about your role in the project, whether it was the filming of it, the script, or the research you did into that world.
I mean, just how big it is. It's such a big universe, and I feel so grateful that I just get to be like a little part of it, to be honest. And everybody on that job, I think the casting of the four is phenomenal, and they're so wonderful, and Matt Shackman's amazing. So I'm very excited. Yeah.
Me too. Thank you so much for chatting with me. Such a huge fan of yours, and can't wait to see what you do in that film and everything else you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Chris, so when you're trying to find the reality of this role, when you're trying to find the reality of being infected, diseased, very primal, what sort of places do you go to emotionally as an actor to find that?
It's a mixed bag, really, of things. It's research-wise, it's like the first time I had to sort of research more National Geographic type stuff than, other movies or something like that. But it's interesting, and, you've seen the movie, so there's different levels. As the process is happening, there's, maybe 80% human, 20% animal, and then that sort of shifts. So to sort of track how a human would react to something as opposed to an animal. So if a human reacts one way if it feels ill or if it's scared, as opposed to how does an animal act if it feels ill or if it's scared. It's a little levels game for that.
Well, and since you shot out of sequence, like, did that almost help, or was that more of a challenge, like the levels of prosthetics and makeup transformations that you were using?
Well, you do all the work beforehand, and then so you sort of have to track it mentally. But the good thing is that the prosthetics sort of can easily remind you of what stage you're meant to be in, and Arian did such a great job in his focus on detail. He's really specific. So, once I can see myself in, let's call it stage 1, 2, or 3, I knew I kind of can just remember where I'm supposed to be at mentally.
Looking back at all your work, no matter what project you're involved in, I think that you're a very fearless actor in the roles that you're choosing and the way that you're approaching a role. Was there any sort of like intimidation of like, this is the Wolfman, like this is an iconic, 100-year-old role? Was there any nervousness about taking that on?
With that, there was nervousness, but not with that specifically. Only because I'd seen most iterations of Wolfman, and the nice thing is I think they're all quite different. Whether it's the original, whether it's the Wolfman with Benicio, whether it's the Jack Nicholson, whether it's the American Werewolf in London, which is kind of a comedy. I think while the character sort of more or less remains, the allegories and the sort of themes around it have all changed. So I didn't feel like I needed to like repeat a role. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like it's like, I don't know, Batman or something like that. You can kind of have your own spin on it, and because it's such a different story around it.
Well, and I guess along those lines, I know your work from like It Comes at Night and Possessor, the more genre work that you've taken on. So now, being a fearless performer, is there another like iconic monster or iconic like horror villain that you'd maybe be interested in taking on in the future?
If they involve prosthetics, no. No, but the monster or villain, like iconic. No, I mean, like, I know vampires have been done a lot, but I love, I sort of love the new wave of, like, vampire comedy stuff, like What We Do in the Shadows, and I think that would be fun.
So it sounds like no Freddy Krueger for you.
No thanks.
But maybe a Michael Myers. You could just throw a mask on, right? Nope, I don't think there's prosthetics involved in that.
I could really nicely float through that performance and not, phone that one in. That would actually be a nice one if I just sort of want to kick back and just walk around slowly. I would actually do that. Yeah, I'll be Mike Myers. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, and congrats on the film.
Nice one, thanks.
Leigh, congrats on the film.
Thank you.
Now, I wondered, since this is such an insular story that unfolds under such a short amount of time, how much like lore and how much mythology did you personally craft of this is what's happening, this is why it's happening, we don't need to show that on screen, or did you leave it totally ambiguous?
I did have a bit of this mythology. You got this isolated local community. I love it when a movie or a story that delves into the secrets of an isolated community. You feel like there's something there hiding from you. Movies have always illustrated that really well. So I figured this community has this virus. They know about it, but they know the rules of how to avoid it. Just move around during the day. At night is when it's most active. They probably have maps of where it is the most. So I felt like the citizens of this town or this community in the movie knew the rules. So I kind of built it up, but I didn't go too far because I wanted to keep that mystery about it.
When you developed The Invisible Man, there was a much longer period of time since the previous Invisible Man, and now approaching Wolfman, where there's so much legacy, and Benicio's movie was 15 years ago.
Right.
Like, how do you approach honoring the character, but also making sure your story does its own thing? Or do you even think about legacy?
I do think about it. I think because especially when you're dealing with a character that is so classic and goes back such a long way, there's been so many iterations of it. I think my first thought is always, what am I going to bring that's new to this? What's the window in? I don't think the best approach for me personally would be just total homage. Like, I love the character, but I don't necessarily want to build a shrine to that original text. I want to kind of drag it into the modern world, recontextualize it, and also find a different way in. Sometimes a perspective can just be the thing. You don't have to change the person's whole story, but all of a sudden, by making it more internal and saying, "Oh, I want to see what the transformation looks like when you're the person changing. How does it sound?" That becomes interesting.
Now, I got to ask, like, you were on Wolfman, you left Wolfman, came back to Wolfman. You were on Escape from New York. You left Escape from New York. Is that something we could ever see you returning to, or is that,
I don't know. I feel like, these projects, it's so funny with the movie industry, as you know, the projects they can die for various reasons. It could be something as simple as, oh, we lost the rights. It could be something like, I'm just not gelling with the producers. I feel like the projects that do come to life are almost accidents. It's like, oh, this one actually happened. So I think for now, Escape from New York, if it came back around, I'd think about it. But for now, it's not happening.
For now, you have escaped.
I have escaped from New York. Yes, exactly.
well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
And congrats on the film. I love your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much.
I know this project initially took shape like 5 years ago, shortly after The Invisible Man. And some different filmmakers, different actors have been involved. How much did this current version of Wolfman change from that initial talks, if at all?
I think that, Leigh's version has not changed a lot. But I think what we definitely wanted to do was like a more grounded version of a Wolfman movie. And I think that never really changed. So a more human story of a Wolfman. Yeah.
Well, and I know also that this is, such a bold new take on the version of the monster.
Yes.
Were there, developing the look of the character? Was that something like Leigh knew very early on and you knew very early on? Or were there like a lot of tests, a lot of different takes on it?
So I introduced him to Arian Twidden, who is the makeup designer. Because I knew that we needed somebody that was a visionary and that will be very passionate about it. And they hit it off. And then when the first time that we saw the maquette, I was like, well, that is because I think that the idea that it's based on a disease, it's so much scarier. Like, again, like it could happen to you. So I think when we saw it, we're like, oh, this is happening. And it's super scary. And it was right there. Yeah.
And I guess working with Leigh so often, when was it that you knew like, okay, yes, you've got it. This is definitely the take on the character. Or was it just the fact that it's Leigh, you knew it was going to be good no matter what he did?
Well, I do. I trust him implicitly as like, it was like in Leigh we trust basically. No, but I also, when I saw it, I was like, yeah. So it's happening. Yeah.
Well, and this is obviously a new take on an iconic universal monster, similar to Invisible Man. What makes this so different from what audiences might know about the Invisible Man?
The Invisible Man or the Wolf?
The Wolf, right?
Sorry,
like what sets this one apart from maybe what they saw in that?
Well, I think that it's a more grounded take, and it's more. I think it centers more like a more what could happen, what could really happen. Like the version that doesn't have fantastical powers or whatever. Like that, it's more. This is a disease, and this could be happening to you should you be bitten by a wolf? Yeah.
A wolf-like thing or something.
Yes.
And with the iconic branding, this character goes back over 100 years. Does that excite you, the legacy of this character, or is there some apprehension or nervousness around taking on such a
No, I think that the old fans will really appreciate it, and I want to get the new fans in. So I think that like there's a way to combine everything and be very respectful with everything, but embrace the future of it.
Well, and I know since it was like such a huge success right before the pandemic hit, that The Invisible Man was, it took the world by storm. And I know Leigh has said that he's not totally interested in a sequel, but I know Elizabeth has said she's interested. Yeah. For you, do you think you could see a sequel without Leigh's involvement?
No, but I could see a sequel with everyone's involvement. I would love to see one. I just think that the character of Cecilia, it's so fantastic, and I would want to see what she wants to do next.
And I do like the Easter egg where if fans look really closely throughout the Wolfman, they'll see the Invisible Man.
Yes.
He's in the background of every scene.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit hard
Exactly. Yeah. It's a crossover. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you
I really
so much.
appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.
Congrats on the film.
Thank you.